Hey everybody, it's Corey Poirier back again talking about Blue Talks, book number 6. And so excited to be here with one of the co authors from the book. We decided to do a special interview with her today, maybe a 20-minute conversation about the book, how she got involved, a little bit about her background. So, Lisa Shermerhorn, so excited to have you here today. Lisa, where we usually like to start, and it relates probably to the fact that I don't like reading bios where I'm messing up words and stuff. So where I usually like to start is to get you to tell us a little bit about who you are and your backstory. So can you tell us a little bit about who Lisa is?
Sure, sure. I'm actually a mindset coach. And how I got involved in that was about 20 years ago. I had a breakdown. I was suicidal. I had no sense of self. I grew up thinking that I was stupid. I had these learning disabilities that I didn't know that I had. They were undiagnosed. And so everyone could read and write and do all these things. And I didn't believe in myself, and I was always a year to 2 years behind everyone. So I spent every summer in summer school. And I gave my power away to everyone and everything that I thought that was who was smarter than me. And so by the time I hit middle, my mid 30s, I was like, I have no idea who I am. I don't know why I'm here. And I just had this horrible breakdown. And in searching, I was going to therapists 2 to 3 times a week, and I wasn't feeling better, and someone suggested a hypnotist, and I was like, "A hypno what?" I was like, "Don't they, like, make you quack like a duck on stage?" I had no sense of who they were and what they could offer me, and they said, "Just give it a try," and I was so desperate, I figured I'd give it a shot. What I didn't realize was that with hypnosis, you could get to the root cause of your issues really quickly, and it sold me, and I went on this journey of going. I was so hungry. It opened up this huge door, from going from studying from all these different techniques, all these different people. And what I wanted to do is I strived to become the healer that I was looking for, the person I was looking for 20 years ago. So I developed all these tools. I studied hypnosis, neuro linguistic programming, emotional freedom technique, and you name it, it goes on. I've even worked with indigenous tribes around the world, and it's been quite an amazing journey. And so that's the beginning of my story.
Yeah, I sense when you say the beginning of my story, obviously there's a lot more to it. And I'd like to jump in there first and foremost because one of the things that popped up to me there is because I was in the same boat, not necessarily being far into these other modalities that exist. And like I was that person that whenever somebody first told me what yoga was, I just I couldn't even conceive of that. I was like, what? A whole bunch of people get together wearing tights and sweat in a room together, and like I was like, what? And so that made no sense to me. And then hypnosis, again, to your point, all I had known about were the rock star hypnotists that would get on stage and, like you said, make people quack like a duck. And so I didn't, I was not down any of those paths. Was certainly not, conscious, if you want to call that, or woke, I guess is the new term. So I really find that intriguing. So let me ask, Lisa, you made it sound so easy there when you shared that, meaning like such a quick, short distance from never knowing these things existed to now you're whole. So I guess my question is, what was it like at first? Like, did you embrace this at first? Were you kind of like, whoa, what is all this? I'm just curious what kind of went through that process.
Well, what was interesting for me is I found spirituality and learning to trust and surrender. And so one of the first books that then gave me was, and we were talking about this earlier, was a book by James Redfield and the Celestine Prophecy. And then I moved on to some other books, and I couldn't stop consuming. I could not stop reading. And what I learned was that I I wasn't responsible for a lot of things, that I had to learn to surrender and allow and connect and discover what my own real abilities were. Because when you give your power away to other people, what happens is you start listening to other people and think that everyone else knows better than you, especially if they're an expert.
Mhm.
And so if someone wanted to help me with my website and then my languaging, I always thought, okay, they know better than I do. And what it did was it put me on this trail of living other people's lives. I had no sense of what my purpose is, of what I knew that I was good at something. I knew that I was good at hypnosis. I knew that I had the ability to heal, but I didn't know how to get the message out. I didn't know how to explain to other people what I did because it was different.
Mm.
And one of the things that recently helped me understand myself better was growing up. Because I had these learning disabilities, I learned differently than other people. I absorbed information differently. I don't memorize large amounts of information and then recall and have the ability to be tested. That's just not my thing. But I understand concepts. And so for me, it's really been about honoring and accepting the fact that I'm different. Because growing up, when you're different, you're bullied,
Mhm.
you're the outcast, you're the black sheep. So you think there's something wrong with you. And what I realized later on was that being different was my gift. The way that I live my life, the way that I do things. And one of the things that I did about 2 years ago was become a why coach, because someone did my why and helped me discover my why and my purpose. So there's this fellow, Gary Sanchez. He saw Simon Sinek speak about the importance of your why, and he said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. I want to learn about my why." And Simon said to him, "Well, I don't help you find your why. I just tell you why it's important." So Gary went on to interview thousands of people over 10 years and discovered their 9 whys. So when I took the test and it came up challenge people are people who think outside the box. They like to do things differently. And so, hence, I live in a log home on the side of a mountain in Vermont. And I used to live in New York City. So people are like, what are you doing up there?
That's that's
But
that's that's amazing. Yeah, I think that's definitely two different ends of the world. That's for sure.
absolutely. But I found me. I found what was important to me and where I felt peace instead of listening to everyone else. And part of the chapter that I wrote for this book talks about my journey of being in a marriage for 29 years, and I was deeply depressed because the person that I was when I got married at a young age was nowhere near who I had become. So we didn't fit together anymore, and I thought of that as a failure, and I didn't want to break up my family, and I was terrified to be alone, and all these things came through my head. And I said, how am I going to survive? I've been with this man for practically my whole life. What am I going to do? And I knew that I was afraid to be alone, but I also knew that I was afraid of walking doing a fire walk. And I was training with a woman who was an elder in a West African form of shamanism. And she invited me to do this week-long training. And the week included walking 7 to 10 feet of fire every night. It was breaking arrows from your throat. It was walking 4 feet of broken glass and bending rebar, a 10-foot piece of rebar from your throat. And the final graduation at the end of the week was walking 40 feet of red hot coals.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I don't want to give it away of what happened to me during that week, because you have to read the chapter. But that experience changed my life and gave me the courage to move through that fear. And so what I realized is that one of my gifts that I've always known about myself is whatever I'm afraid of, I always know I have to accomplish. I need to overcome that. And so even though it took me a long time to get there, I knew I had to get there. And I knew it was always haunting me, that little voice in the back of your head. And I knew because of that, that I was going to have to be on my own for a while because it was such a fear of mine.
Wow, I mean, there's so many directions I could certainly go from there, Lisa. And it's interesting when you first started talking about it, and you'll understand what I mean here. And I wanted to talk in a second as well about the whole idea of finding your why and the Simon Sinek approach. But when you talked about walking fire and the arrows and stuff like that, so it's funny how we associate that a lot of times with Tony Robbins events. So I know he does most of those things at his events now. But it's funny
Yes.
because I heard about the arrows through Tony's events, and I heard about the walking on fire. But it seems like the way you did it would be a totally different experience because you like experienced it from people who probably initially in a lot of ways maybe years ago created this experience, like created this whole thing.
Yeah, so Sundor is the training company that trained Tony Robbins, and that was the organization that I trained with.
Oh wow.
So, yeah. So, what's involved in that is really about your mindset and mind over matter, because we have no idea what we can accomplish when we really set our mind to it. Because you can watch people, in all kinds of cases, will themselves to live and will themselves to die. The miracles that happen all the time. And I will tell you that, for instance, in the glass walk,
Hmm.
4 feet of walking broken glass, our minds will say that that's impossible. How do you get to the other side of walking 4 feet of broken wine bottles without cutting yourself?
Hmm.
I have the video on my LinkedIn. If you want to watch me actually do it. Um, but what happens is you can go at any speed you want. You can move the glass around with your feet. So you have control and you are as present as you will ever be in your entire life. And so as you move slowly and as you're moving things around, you are fully present and feel, and it's almost like you're seeing the world through the bottom of your feet. For me, it was one of the coolest things I had ever experienced. I had friends there who said they'd never want to do that again. I would contend that I have no interest in ever walking fire again.
You did it, right? You don't have to
Yeah.
do it multiple times, I don't think, do you?
No, no, I accomplished what I set out to. I have no interest in running firewalks. I could do one if I wanted to, but it wasn't my thing. I knew that I needed to go through that process.
And so, just kind of to reiterate, because I may at some point decide to do that myself. But what was the name of the company again? You said
Sundor.
Sundor.
Sund, I think it's OOR. I could be wrong on the
Okay, I'll
spelling. It's
Google.
been
If
a
I'm
while.
sure if I Google Sundor Glass Firewalk, I'm sure
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
some form of
The
that'll come up.
trainings. Yeah,
Yeah, that's. I mean, that sounds like an amazing experience, though.
it is. It is. It was life changing for me.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
Was it life changing?
it was completely life changing. It was like a switch went on in me. It was like I was in this dark place of not believing in myself to suddenly the switch. And I will tell you, the way that a firewalk works is that we have what we call our own chi energy. You've heard the expression that we have our own chi. The fire has its own chi. It's called the nume, Nume.
Okay.
So you have to keep your energy at or above the same energy as the fire. So that's why when Tony Robbins does his firewalks, he plays blaring music. He gets people's energy up. They're pumped, they're excited. He gets their vibration and their frequency high. Don't ever walk a firewalk if you're depressed because you will burn yourself.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So the idea is energetically you're raising your frequency to that of equal to the fire or above and holding that. And that's the key. And once you do that and really holding the belief, and that's how the arrows work, that's how the rebar. I still have that rebar as a reminder. My partner let me have it, and he and I he was crazy. He was a bit younger than me, and he was in somersault across the firewalk one of the practice nights, and I was like,
Wow. What?
yeah. I said I did. But people. people need to do what they need to do. It was not my thing.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and again, no base knowledge to base this on, but I think there's got to be something to do with like how it's all leveling out or whatever. I would assume if you did like a flip or whatever, and you left it and it was still stuck to your foot, it would burn you then, wouldn't it?
Oh, he burned himself.
That's what, like
Oh yeah.
like I think like if you just took one piece of this coal out and put it on the ground and then stepped on it and put your foot on it, it would burn it, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
I
you
would
can
think.
still burn yourself. Absolutely. I mean, people do get burned doing it. The other thing is, and this was a mistake we made in one of the fires, was that you want to keep it level. There was one section in the center that had a bit of a dip into the ground. So we went to even it out, and we went over and filled it in. What we didn't realize, we filled it in with sand, and sand has silica that's hotter than dirt. So there
Ouch.
was a hot spot in the center of the firewalk. And so, and that's when you get that shock, things like that. So there's a lot to learn about, and knowing the different types of wood, because different types of wood burn faster and hotter. There's a whole lot of information you need to know before you run a firewalk.
I mean, it's fascinating to me, and I'll move away from this topic, but I'll just add that my girlfriend and I have done sweat lodge experiences multiple times,
Yeah.
and what to me is fascinating is being there before it starts, like watching how they get the rocks ready, how they select the certain rocks, how they. We actually we were at one place and there was no sweat lodge, but we convinced them, I think, or a bunch of us convinced them to do a sweat, and so an elder came and we actually built the lodge with our bare hands,
Yes.
and we got pictures of us building at different stages. But the elder showed us how to build it. It was surprisingly much easier to build. When you see it all, you're like, how did we just do that? But if you know what you're doing, which we didn't, we were being guided.
Yeah.
But my point is that it's fascinating, all the stuff that goes into building it, to selecting the right rocks, to building, the hole where you're putting the rocks in that you're putting the steam on, to making sure you're not burning people by how much steam you put on. Like it's crazy to think that something with no technology is that technical.
It is technical. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to build one as well, and it's so fascinating. And even the type of tarps that you use, because it can be dangerous. You don't want to use a plastic tarp. You have to make sure that they're, breathable material. There's all kinds of things to learn, and even the art of the fire keeping of the hot stones that go
Mhm.
in. There's a whole thing around that. Yeah,
Well, we had just to finish that story off. We had
yeah.
a 15-year-old in with us, and
Wow.
he. So we had younger than that at the same time, but there was this 15-year-old in, and I don't know why it reminded me of not the episode, the movie, something about Mary. Whenever there was a scene with Ben Stiller in the bathroom where he cut himself, and they say, "We got a bleeder," and they're moving him
Yeah.
out. And a lot of people remember that, just that word, "We got a bleeder," and they're moving him out the thing. Well, what I came into my head after, not when it happened, because I was concerned, but after it happened, every time I think about this experience, I think we got a fainter, because we actually had somebody overheat in it,
Yeah.
and he fainted, and they had to pull him out of the lodge, like he passed out. And so, anybody that thinks this stuff isn't real, like you got to be careful.
It's really there's a lot of prep that needs to be done beforehand, and hydrate yourself and monitor yourself. You can come out and go back in. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that didn't happen this time because we built it from scratch and nobody was planning to go. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
a 15-year-old. He might, who knows, right? He might have been eating chocolate bars and pop all day. But either way, it was quite an experience to see it. Because everybody was okay, it was another lifetime experiences that you never forget. So I didn't mean to go that far down the rabbit hole, but it does relate to your chapter. And so
Yeah.
circling back to Blue Talks, why, and I'm talking this in general now, and I'll add too for those that might be seeing this now in the replay or live and joining us. The reason I have the website there is that's where you can grab yourself a copy of the Blue Talks book before we bring it over to Amazon. BlueTalksBook.com. This is Blue Talks book number 6. I'm here with one of the co-authors, Lisa Shermerhorn. And as far as the what I was going to ask you, Lisa, is in general, not necessarily just in this book, but in general, why is it important to you to share your message with other people and to do the work that you're doing? Like, why is it important to you?
You know what? That's a good question, because for a long time I didn't think that I had much to offer. I didn't understand what I was just in survival mode doing what I needed to do to take care of me and felt the idea to help others. The more I talked to people and the more I realized that I have unique skills that help inspire people. And so I felt that it was important to be able to, let people know that it is possible. Because there's not really a lot of new information in the world. A lot of it is the same information regurgitated over and over again with our own personal spin on it. So maybe someone is just waiting to hear my own personal version. And that's really what's important to me, and the work that I do. And I have to say, working with you inspired. I had been trying to write a book for 20 years. This was the first chapter and inspired an entire book that I just finished this week that's about to go to the editor. And it's entitled In Every Belief, There is a Lie. And if you look at the word belief, LIE is in the middle of it. And it's about the lies that we tell ourselves and how we're programmed. So I lied to myself because I believed that I was stupid. So that was the lie I told myself, and that was the lens I saw the world through. And once I healed that, it changed the lens, and then I could reach my truth. So we get told lies over and over and over again. We even inherit lies from our ancestors through something called epigenetics. There's an actual science of it, where they actually did studies with mice, shocked them every time they smelled a particular smell. Their grandchildren, when they would smell that smell, would run without being electrocuted. So we inherit phobias, fears, anxiety, stress, but also gifts. So it's about being mindful of, is this mine? Or does this belong to someone else? Did this belong to my parents? Did this belong to my teacher, my schoolmates, my significant other? We get programmed on so many different levels. How do we know what is a lie and what is our truth? And so I wrote this book to help people navigate and give them tools to help release those beliefs, those lies, and come up with their own truth.
Wow. Yes, I mean that. So that I did not know about that mouse experiment that you mentioned, and that's fascinating to me as well. I'm going to look that up. I did not know that. That's amazing because I love stuff like that because it proves it. It's then
Yes.
it's scientific. It's not just we're saying, oh, trust me, this is from your ancestors, or this is it's actually proven.
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of I put a bunch of studies, scientific studies, and then an experience that I had with a client of mine, because she was struggling with the fact she had Brazilian ancestry, and she came from a long line of healers, but none of them could make a living at it, and they all struggled financially. And so I actually did a hypnosis session where we traveled through her DNA to the root cause of her issue around making money as a healer. And she back to an ancestor where when the Spanish, no, the Portuguese came into Brazil, and they were trying to convert everyone to Catholicism. And they said, if this is something of God, you can't charge for it. If this is what you're offering from God, it should be free. So they convinced all of these healers that they were not allowed to charge for it. And that continued as a belief that got passed down generation after generation. And they didn't even know why they believed it anymore. It was part of them. And so every time she tried to start to charge, she would have terrible anxiety. And she was working in the pharmaceutical industry. So I helped her heal that. She quit her job and went back and went to school to become an herbalist.
Wow. So first of all, I have to say too, my mind is blown by your title of your book. I always intrigued by titles, and just like the idea of um, in every belief there's a lie. Like I never thought about the fact that those letters are in the other word, and so I just always love titles that have a double meaning basically. And so I just first of all I want to commend you on the title of the book because I think that's gonna turn a lot of heads. And at the end of the day, we can say whatever we want, but I would say between the cover and the title, and then maybe you could add in endorsements, but between the cover and the title, that's a big part of whether your book is successful or not. So I think you already got a big one done, which is getting a title that people will find clever, but also at the same time it has powerful meaning. So I just want to add that. As far as the work that you do, you just mentioned a very amazing experience where you were able to reset somebody's blueprint. And so, Lisa, as we wind down, and there's never enough time, so I'll call it to be continued. I'm hoping viewers and listeners here got a little glimpse of how powerful some of these stories are when you consider, Lisa, you're one co-author out of almost 30, and just your story alone, we could probably talk for 2 hours just on even on the story that you put in the book. So I hope that gives people a feel for how this is a complete book, almost with multiple books within it. But having said that, Lisa, before we let you run, I want to ask you two-part question as a final question. One, what is it like for people to work with you? So what is, you shared with that
Mhm.
a person, the pharmaceutical rep that now has gone back to school on the herb side, but what does it look like to work with you in general? And the second part to that, which is probably more important, or just as important, I should say, is how can people reach out to you and connect with you if they do want to talk to you further about the work that you do?
Right. So the best thing is that I work online as well as in person. So you can actually do this work through Zoom, which has been fantastic. As long as you remember to plug in your computer so it doesn't go out in the middle of a session, which has happened, and you don't have
Absolutely.
dogs barking and disturbing you, you're good. But what someone will come to me, and I work with a lot of executives too, is that there are these belief systems, especially money mindset is a big one that I work with. And it comes from their childhood. There are these lies that people take on, that people with money are miserable, that their children hate them, they're on drugs, they're getting divorced. So what I do is I take them to the root cause. What's beautiful about hypnosis and a lot of these techniques that I use is they get to the root cause quickly. If you're coming to me 6 months from now for the same exact thing, then I haven't done my job. Or you have some serious resistance that you're not willing to get rid of. But I contend that in a couple of sessions, that we can do some really deep work, go back to the root cause of when this belief, where it happened, release it, and replace it with what you wish you could have had instead. So what you're doing is I call it time travel for your emotions. You can't change what happened, but you can change the way you think about it. And then we also have these saboteurs that we have in our lives, these younger parts of us that have arrested development that are running our lives. For instance, when we have this belief that as a child, food is comfort, food is love. So when we feel lonely, we're like, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds, and we're feeling good. And then at night, we start to feel lonely, and out comes the pint of ice cream. Those younger versions of ourselves, they run us. They're in charge. They get to be the boss. So we want to talk to that part and give it a new job. And they love getting a new job because they're exhausted. That part of us wants to be helpful. It thinks it is. So there's a number of tools and techniques that I give people, and I give people a lot of tools that they can use themselves. And that's a small part of it, but it's really about reframing how you see the world, changing your perspective. And I have a website is peakperformancemindsetcoaching.com. And you can reach me through that. I have a partner as well, business partner, Kevin Martin. And also you can reach me on LinkedIn or on Facebook, Lisa Shermerhorn, if you can figure out how to spell it. And if you want to watch my fire walk and I think my glass walk, the videos are on my LinkedIn in the save video. So you can check them
Wow. Well,
out.
I'm gonna check those out by tomorrow. I'm gonna either later
Okay.
today or tomorrow. I'm gonna check those out myself. And Lisa, I just put your main website in the comments as well for people, uh, just so that if it's an easy click if they're already on there anyway. And yeah, I mean, this has been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. I was so glad that we got to do our own interview because we got a little bit more time, and I didn't know about the firewalk and a lot of other stuff that may not have come up if we did a shorter one. So, Lisa, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited for you for the new book to be coming out. I'm so excited for you to be a part of Blue Talks and in this book as well. So I just want to salute you, thank you, and with your permission, call this a to be continued.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate and I feel honored to be here.
My pleasure, and always a pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for joining us as well. Thank you for supporting the Blue Talks book. We're pretty much at the stage where we're going to be bringing it over to Amazon probably next week. So you guys have helped make that possible. So thanks for doing that. But if you still want to grab a copy in the pre-order phase, again, bluetalksbook.com. You can grab yourself a copy now. Otherwise, again, thank you so much for supporting the book. And I hope to be able to announce within the next week or so that we have a whole bunch of international best-selling authors with us as well. So thank you, Lisa. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.